Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about erosion. Erosion is the processes in which weathered material is moved around. So we said weathering is the breaking down of rocks due to mechanical or chemical processes, and as those rocks get broken apart into smaller and smaller pieces, they don't necessarily just pile up at the base of the rock, but they're actually moved around. So how does that happen? Well, the first process is man. Farming and landscaping. Move soil around. Sometimes we're breaking up rocks, but we're making the land be what we want it to be. A second process involves water. When it rains, the force of gravity pulls water downward. And across landscapes. So it's pulling water downhill. It's pulling water down from high ground to a lower ground, across the landscapes. As that water is moving across the earth, it's picking up little bits of weathered material and soil. This is called sediment. So as it moves, it collects bits of the weathered material and soil. This is called sediments. When water is coming off of the land and running down into a river or pond, it is called runoff. And where it regularly happens, it's called watershed. The water starts by collecting in like a little indentation called a gully. Gullies become streams. Streams become rivers. and they carry sediment to the ocean. So it can carry sediment from mountains and then travel many hundreds and thousands of miles all the way down to the ocean. Sometimes when it rains, instead of running down the hill in a tiny little gully or stream, it kind of acts like an entire sheet. So a sheet flow is water running down a hillside during the rain. And it acts like a water slide. Covers a wide area, kind of like a big sheet of water. The next process, we just talked about man, we've talked about water. The next process that has a hand in erosion is ice. We're on number 3. In the form of glaciers. Glaciers are giant sheets of ice. They can be many miles thick. And many miles long. They are sometimes described as rivers of ice. And just like a river, they are moving, but very slowly. So if you are moving very slowly, you might be described as moving like a glacier. They move very slowly, and as they move, usually down a mountain, they end up carrying rocks and boulders along with it. So if you've ever been on a hike in the mountains and all of a sudden in the middle of the woods is a ginormous rock, that was probably put there during the last ice age. Another process that has a hand in erosion, we mentioned it with water, is gravity. Gravity can cause rock slides. This is when the force of gravity is able to overcome a rock's natural tendency to stay in place. So when the force of gravity is able to overcome a rock's inertia, it will roll down the hill. Or bounce. as the case may be. Here's my rock, and here it is, rolling down the hill. Usually you see a sign on the side of the road that says caution, falling rocks. Usually it's spelled correctly though. And usually the sign looks better than that. The last process I want to talk about that has its hand in erosion is the wind. The wind carries small particles. So you guys have all been outside on a very windy day in the playground and been hit in the face with sand or dirt. So the wind carries very small particles away. Some really big hurricanes that we have had have been known to carry sand to us from the Sahara Desert in Africa. It doesn't happen all the time, but it has happened. So since erosion is all about moving soil in weathered material, you can imagine that that's only sometimes a good idea. We definitely don't want to lose all of our topsoil because then we can't grow plants, and we need plants to eat. So how can we prevent erosion? One way would be to increase the amount of vegetation. So plant roots help hold soil in place. Another way we can help prevent erosion is to decrease the slope of a hill. And this is usually accomplished by cutting steps into the side of the hill, or it's called terracing. So here's my really steep hill, and it's hard to there's not a lot of surface area here. Maybe it's hard for some plants to grow. So what I'm going to do instead, it's my really steep hill, is I'm going to cut a step out of the hill. And now I've given myself a nice flat surface in which to grow stuff. This is called terracing. So the hill is cut up. And it's called terracing. And they use this in China to grow rice. Before I go on to the next part, I want to add something to gravity of rock sides. They can also cause mud flows. So if there's not enough vegetation and just soil, the dirt absorbs water from rain, will become very heavy, and gravity will pull it down the hillside. Okay. We're not done yet. I would like to talk about the other side of erosion. Is called deposition. So erosion is taking things away. Deposition is the process of water or wind depositing that sediment that was carried away. Okay. I'm going to talk about 5 landforms that are made due to the deposition of material that has been eroded away from someplace else. Our first part. It's called a river delta. What happens is the river is flowing and it's flowing pretty fast. And then it bumps up against the ocean. And the ocean is not moving nearly as fast as that river was. And the river gets slowed down a lot and kind of starts to pile up upon itself. As it piles up upon itself, that sediment is no longer being carried forward. So it kind of starts to fill in at the mouth of the river. And as it's filling in, it's widening at the very mouth and starts backing up into the river and begins making a triangle shape, and that is the delta. So now I will put it into words what I just talked about. So the river delta is a landform caused when it is caused by sediment. When a fast-moving river or any river meets the slower moving body of water. Usually it's the ocean. and it forms a triangle shape. And it's called a delta because that is a Greek letter. Delta is a triangle shape. The next landform that occurs due to erosion is called a floodplain. Here's my river. And on either side of the river, because sometimes it floods, not a whole heck of a lot will grow. And a large, flat, open land area, usually it's pretty grassy, is called a plain. And then on either side of that, there are hills. So we are talking about a floodplain. Floodplains occur in areas that are flat, on either side of a river. And then when the river floods, it deposits sediments here on the floodplain. This can be really good for plants because usually these sediments are nutrient rich. Can't spell this morning. New. And they're really good for farming. The downside of it is, in the spring when the rivers flood, then the farmers lose all of their food. And so you hear every spring of, for example, where the Mississippi River is flooding. That is an annual occurrence. The water overflows its banks and moves into the land on either side. The next landform that I want to talk to you about is called a moraine. Moraines are a mound of debris that are pushed out ahead of a glacier as it moves, kind of like a bulldozer, and it gets left behind as the glacier retreats. And it is literally a mound of dirt. It kind of looks like, can be like a giant horseshoe shaped. A horseshoe shaped ridge. My attempt at drawing kind of a 3D. Here's my glacier back here as it is retreating. Here's my little glacial river to show that my glacier is melting. And here's my moraine. The next land feature that owes its existence to erosion and the deposition of weathered material is called a talus deposit or a scree slope. So what this is, maybe you've seen it if you've been up in the White Mountains, is we have a cliff face, and then right below the cliff face is kind of a steep slope, and that steep slope has a bunch of jagged pieces of rock. This is what the scree is. It's basically loose debris. That comes from rocks having fallen off the cliff. So here's my cliff. Here is my next rock that is going to get ready to fall. So occasionally these rocks will crumble off as part of the weathering process, and as they fall, they smash into a million gazillion pieces, creating the scree slope or the talus deposits. The last landform that I want to talk about today, due to deposition, is dunes. Dunes are a mound or a ridge made of sand, usually, or other small sediment. That are deposited by wind. So when you are at the beach and you are first entering the beach area, you'll see these kind of little hills of sand and grass. These happen because of the wind blowing. Here's my little seagrass. You might see signs that are telling you to please stay out of the dunes. The dunes make their own little ecosystem. The seagrass helps to hold those dunes in place, and we would like those dunes to stay in place because they help protect the area on this side from the ocean during a storm. And that is why the dunes at the beach are important, but you also might see them in the desert or anywhere where there is not a lot of vegetation to be seen.